Welcome to episode 2 of Marti Talks Theatre. 6 quick sessions celebrating Theatre Fairfield's new artistic home in the Wien Blackbox Theatre at the Quick Center for the Arts. I'm Marti Lomonico, professor of theatre and co-producer of Theatre Fairfield. Theatre Fairfield has been performing at the Quick Center since it opened its doors back in 1989. But our home base was the charming, intimate Pepsico Theatre across campus. The Pepsico suffered a devastating flood in September 2018, and we've been nomads ever since. Until now. We are really proud to become the resident company in the Black Box as of the 2020-21 season, and are eager to introduce ourselves to the many quick patrons who have yet to see one of our shows. Marti Talks Theatre introduces you to Theatre Fairfield past and present. The first 3 episodes, Wednesdays at 4 p.m., are interviews with outstanding graduates of Fairfield's theatre program who began their theatre careers right here in the Quick Center. The last 3 episodes in May will move to Thursday mornings at 11 and will feature leading actors in our production of Shakespeare's Titus Andronicus, which would have opened on Monday night of this week. For the full schedule of quick sessions, go to the Quick Center's website, www.quickcenter.com. One of the very few pleasures of the age of COVID-19 is finally having the opportunity to bring John Power, our Hollywood superstar, back to campus. John graduated from Fairfield in 1996 as a communication major and theater minor, but he was an extremely active member of Theatre Fairfield. In fact, he rarely left the theater, to cause him to always quip, "There is no such thing as a theater minor at Fairfield University." I would just like to note that the Film, Television, and New Media program, which is very active now in the Department of Visual and Performing Arts, did not exist back in '96. So John was a communication major, theater minor. Today, he is a senior vice president of casting for Warner Brothers television studios in Los Angeles, where he currently oversees the casting of many series, including The Flash, Claws, Supernatural, All Rise, You, and Riverdale, as well as the upcoming new series, Superman and Lois, and Gossip Girl. Previously, he has overseen the casting of such series as Arrow, Blind Spot, The Middle, Suburgatory, and the Emmy-nominated miniseries Political Animals. Prior to joining the staff at Warner Brothers in Los Angeles, he worked as a casting executive at NBC, where he oversaw the final season of Will and Grace, as well as The Office and Las Vegas. From 2002 through 2005, John was the casting manager at Warner Brothers TV in New York City, where he worked on the original casting of numerous series, including The OC, One Tree Hill, The New Adventures of Old Christine, The Closer, and Veronica Mars. And he did the casting for East Coast location for The West Wing, Without a Trace, and Cold Case. During his time in New York, he also kept his foot firmly in theater. He was, for 4 seasons, the co-casting director with Meg Simon for the Sundance Theater Lab, a summer workshop sponsored by the Sundance Institute that develops new plays and musicals. It is my great pleasure to finally welcome back to campus John Power. Welcome, John.
Thank you so much. It's interesting to hear all the names of those shows kind of strung together in order, the things I've worked on in the past. I've been very lucky. Very lucky.
Super. Well, we're so happy to have you with us today to talk about all of this.
Thank you.
But we're going to start with your career right here with Theatre Fairfield and at the Quick Center. So you actually worked at the Quick Center. Was that a work study job or was it like a job?
It was a job for, all 4 years. I started off ushering both for the Black Box and for the main stage, and then eventually got hired as a house manager. And I also worked in the box office. So, but I did that all 4 years. That was kind of my spending money while I was in college.
Great, great. When you left the theater, which wasn't very often, considering that you were always on stage or doing some great backstage work for Theatre Fairfield, and then you would be working at the Quick Center with your job. So I don't know when you ever left.
Yeah, it was
Talk about those as formative years for you. And starting with your freshman year, and I still have a distinct memory of you auditioning for and being cast in my production of The Flight of the Earls by Christopher Humble, which is a play about the quote unquote troubles in Northern Ireland. And you played a kind of awkward young man with a stammer, Timothy Strain, who we all remember constantly had a transistor radio at your ear. And you told me when we were discussing all this a few days ago, I wasn't even sure I was going to audition. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that is true. You know, I had done, as a lot of people who love theater, I'd done a lot of theater in high school. And when I did my final show in high school, I kind of decided that was going to be it. I started Fairfield as a communications major, so I really didn't even know that much about the theater program at Fairfield when I enrolled. But my freshman year, I think I was having a bit of a harder time adjusting to being in college than I thought I would, when I was very excited to get out of my hometown. And I remember seeing a poster, I think in the cafeteria, for auditions for Flight of the Earls. And I thought I had kind of made my peace with theater and that I wasn't really going to continue to do it. But I figured, why not audition, see what happens. And shockingly, I was cast. So and it was an amazing experience. I mean, getting to work on Flight of the Earls, which, you know, was a play that was so more, had so much more depth than what I was used to doing, you know, high school musicals and things like Neil Simon. It was a great experience. We had a really good cast. There were 7 of us, so it was a pretty intimate production. And that was my first stage experience in the Black Box.
Yeah, great. And then let's just jump to your senior year and your shining moment playing Lloyd, the director, in Noises Off. And I think we'd like our first photo now, please, RJ. And thanks to my colleague, Lynn Porter, thanks, Lynn, she digitized these early images. You know, we weren't doing digital photography in the 90s. So all of our archives, we've had to play catch up with digitizing. But here is Noises Off on a bi-level set. And there you are, John, with your arm, being the director.
Oh, the posset mill. That was, so Noises Off was continues to be one of my favorite plays. If there's ever a production locally, I try to go see it. A friend of mine was actually in a production in Pasadena, I think about 2 years ago, that I went to go see. So I remember campaigning very hard with the powers that be, Marty, to do Noises Off. And I remember conversations about the fact that set may just not work in the Black Box, but which is what had prevented us from doing it up until it was figured out how to do it. And then we had, again, a cast of 9 excellent performers. It was
Can
amazing.
we talk about the 3 cast members and looking at the photo? Can we have the photo one more time, RJ? Thanks. Unfortunately, it's the far right, I think, is being cut out, where one of the people we want to mention, Ryan McKinney, who was playing the stage manager in the play, not being the stage manager, is fixing the door. Sitting on the sofa in the middle is Wendy Popek, who is still acting, and a professional actor up in the balcony there, kind of lying on her side. That's January Lavoie, who is a rather noted professional stage actor. She is now still acting professionally, teaching theater at Emory. Ryan is a theater professor at Kingsborough Community College, City University of New York. And Wendy is still doing a lot of theater and singing while being a college administrator, I think at the University of Scranton, right?
She's at a different school now, but
okay.
yeah, but she's still in the Scranton area, and yeah, still performing and singing.
And I mention this because this fabulous foursome of best friends continue to be, and I have been at their weddings, and I can tell you they like hark back to the days of Noises Off when they're together now, dare we say 25 years later. And those friendships you forge in those formative years are quite extraordinary.
Yeah, it's one of the most amazing gifts that I got from Fairfield was getting to meet those people. And yeah, we still, and you know, we all live in different places. So I'm in LA and Ryan's in New York and Wendy's in Pennsylvania and January is now in Atlanta. But we would get together every year, usually somewhere in the Pennsylvania area. And then we've started a weekly Zoom because it helps us stay in touch. And we actually kind of still comment that we hadn't figured out how to do that before all of this. But yeah, we're very close. They are slated to be in my wedding, which was supposed to happen next month, but is now going to be in 2021. Yeah, we're very, very close.
Which is great. And it all started here, and it continued.
Fairfield. Yes.
Quite extraordinary. You were also a stage manager, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how stage managing helped you. And you actually thought about becoming a professional stage manager for a while.
I did. Yeah. When I graduated from college, yeah, I thought that stage management was where I would want to go. I had a great time. I was an assistant stage manager my freshman year on a show called Museum. And then my junior year, I ended up stage managing our production of 12th Night, which was...
And can we see this photo, please, RJ? So here is a photo from 12th Night. Again, thanks, Lynn Porter. And here are Wendy and January, once again, playing Olivia and Viola, the two leading roles. And please tell the famous 12th Night story when John Power, as our fabulous stage manager, rewrote Shakespeare's Fifth Act.
I did, out of necessity. So yes. We were, in this particular production, we were stage managing from the catwalk. And when Act 5 rolls around, if you know 12th Night, it basically ties up all of the storylines from the first 4 acts, but kind of in pieces. So characters would walk on and give some exposition and tie things up, and then they would move over and other characters would walk on. So 2 of our fellow actors were in the dressing room and completely missed their cue. So we were just kind of sitting there with dead space with the actors who were left on stage. And so I quickly ran down from the catwalk and found other actors that were supposed to go on after the ones that were missing and just had them go on then, and sent other people to go find the ones that were missing. And we just reordered all of Act 5, got to the end, and it all kind of made sense. But yeah, it was hilarious. And it taught me really to think on my feet in that moment.
And what was most remarkable was we only added 2 minutes to the running time of the show.
True.
That was the part that was phenomenal.
We fetched those missing actors quickly.
Yes. In those days, the Quick Center only had one big set of dressing rooms behind the Kelly stage. And the dressing rooms that are now in the Black Box didn't exist. So people had a long walk to get from the dressing room to the stage. And so that was really a pandemonium in the halls moment, which was probably as funny as anything that was going on in the theater. But I was directing, and I can still see you standing there just with great authority, rewriting Shakespeare, getting actors on stage and making it work. And our audiences were none the wiser, which was even more extraordinary. Very funny.
Except for maybe the Shakespeare scholars who were in the audience that day. But other than that, it all made sense at the end.
Great. So let's segue from life at Fairfield to life in the professional world. And working in casting almost immediately. You were in New York City first, as I mentioned earlier, and then ended up moving out to LA. And one of the questions I've asked you to address, because I'm sure everybody in our audience wants to know just what a casting director does besides hire actors, right?
Yes.
And even more, what a casting executive does. Besides making decisions over the head of casting directors. So if you could explain that, and then you've got some wonderful visuals for us to enjoy some of your greater casting adventures, and by way of explaining what it is you do.
Sure. Well, I'll start quickly with what casting people do. So casting directors are those amazing people in this industry that, you can't really study to be a casting director, which is why it was never a career that I thought I would be pursuing when I got out of college. But when I moved to New York and started working in the industry in various other places, I got to know what casting directors do. And essentially, they're the ones that find actors, speaking to their agents, finding them from all various different kind of sources, keeping them in the database in their mind, and bringing them to audition for various projects that you may be working on. So when I started off in casting, my first job was as an assistant to a woman named Meg Simon, who was my very first mentor, who cast all of August Wilson's original Broadway productions. I mean, she's incredible. And so I was her assistant when she was working at the Fox network. And we were there together for about 9 months when she was offered a job at Warner Brothers TV in New York. And I went with her and ended up in that transition getting a promotion to her associate. And our day-to-day was basically having actors come in and audition for the various projects that we would be working on at any given time. And in that, as you had alluded to before, we got to work on, during the summers, on the Sundance Theater Lab, which was a job we did for free, and we would get a free trip to Utah to go see productions. But we worked on one of the original workshops of The Light in the Piazza, I'm forgetting the name of it, Stu's project. Oh my God, I was at the Public. Anyway, just so many amazing pieces of theater that were in their infancy that we got to see kind of grow through the years. And after a couple of years there, I decided for a lot of reasons that I wanted to make the move to LA, and came out with a job with NBC, where I worked at for, again, less than a year before Warner Brothers kind of found a way to bring me back. And I've been there ever since. So with Warner Brothers, other than the stint at NBC, I've been with that company for 18 years at this point. And so that's when I segued also when I came to LA as a casting executive. And what an executive does is we oversee the casting process for the studio. It's a lot of budgets. It's a lot of creative, kind of making sure there's creative control, making sure that the right actors are being hired. And really acting as the liaison between the actual casting process and reporting to the studio and the network to make sure that everyone there is aware of what's going on and supportive of what's going on. I've got to work on so many amazing different shows, comedies and dramas and soap operas and horror and all. I mean, that's the great thing about working at Warner Brothers, is that we produce programming for everyone. So there's a lot of different types of shows that I get to work on a day-to-day basis.
Well, we have a ton of images, so why don't we start rolling through them? And that you cited 3 particular areas of your work that you really wanted to focus on, and one was tracking talent. And the work that you've been doing with the actor Jen Lyon for many years, who is the woman right in the middle of this image.
She's wearing the pink dress. Actually the tallest one in the photo.
Okay.
a lot of hair on Jen at that point. So this is from a show called Claws, which I work on currently. We were actually in the midst of our final season when we unfortunately got shut down due to the coronavirus. But when we're able to get back up and running, we're going to finish up. So Jen and I met, I want to say in 2003 or 4, when she was a graduate of North Carolina School of the Arts. And I saw her first in her showcase and brought her in to meet and to audition for projects. And we developed a relationship. I just found her to be so delightful and funny. And she ended up even working, oddly, at an ice cream store down the street from my apartment that I would frequent. And so we just got to know each other. And then, when I moved to LA, and I think she stayed in New York for the most part, but was doing theater and some TV out there. We just, I would stay in touch with her agent, and she was just someone that I found so impressive and just felt like there was something out there, probably a comedy, that she would be so good in. So I would always make sure that if I was working on comedies, in fact, I worked on a show for ABC a couple of years ago called Suburgatory, and we were looking for the role of the sister, kind of the crazy Southern sister to one of our regulars. And Jen, I had just seen do a production, oddly, of Noises Off at South Coast Rep down in Costa Mesa. She was playing the same role that January played, the role of Brooke.
Right.
And so she was so fresh in my mind, and I saw her.
RJ, can we have that photo, please? Thanks. Yeah.
So there she is in her lingerie. But I had suggested her, because we were having a hard time kind of coming up with an idea for the sister. And so she came in and auditioned and nailed it. And I remember the producer sending an email just saying that, she was so happy she got to meet Jen, and, she was so delighted with what she did on that one episode of that show. So when we were casting Claus, we were looking for the role of one of the best friends of our lead, which is played by Niecy Nash. And Jen came into audition and just, again, nailed it. And it was very clear that she was kind of everybody's top choice for the role. But knowing her career and being able to speak to all of the different things that she had done through the years, I think just hopefully added to the conversation, where I was able to kind of testify on her behalf that she was a get for this, and that she's really special and really talented, and she's been outstanding on the show.
That's great.
So, yeah.
That's great. Let's move to Pretty Little Liars and the story of Shay Mitchell and the difficulty of finding just the right person for the part.
Yeah. So Pretty Little Liars is a show that I worked on, I think about 10 years ago now. And I've also been very fortunate in my job in being able to work on shows that create these kind of young ensembles where you don't necessarily cast stars in these roles because a lot of them are younger, but putting the puzzle pieces together is very important to make sure that it feels balanced. And I remember Pretty Little Liars being an example where we had a lot of the puzzle pieces in place that we were excited about, but we couldn't find somebody for the role of Emily, which was challenging. The character was athletic and had a good head on her shoulders, but she was also about to go through a story where her character was kind of discovering her sexuality. And we'd auditioned, we must have tested that role at least 3 times with various actresses, and we just couldn't find somebody that just fit with everybody that we had already cast. Shay had sent in a tape, I think from Toronto, somewhere in Canada. And we happened to be shooting the pilot in Vancouver. So having a Canadian was perfect. But it was just this self-tape that felt very raw, but there was something about her that was really special. And we ended up just really kind of falling in love with her. And we did the pilot, and you could tell that she was a little green, but I thought that she grew into one of the best actors on the show after 7 seasons. But it was, she really was given a lot of heavy lifting to do. And I've worked with her since. She was in the first season of You. And I've just always been impressed with Shay.
Great. Super. And let's move from there to Riverdale and the story of KJ Appa and his hair, which I'm really going to be interested to hear about.
So Riverdale is based on Archie comics.
Next slide, please.
Which, if the show is currently on, and I think the audience who watches that show probably was not as familiar with Archie comics, which our lead character of Archie iconically has red hair.
Oh, right.
So when we started the casting process, our marching orders were to find a redhead, because he couldn't not look like Archie from the comic books. Betty had to be a blonde, Veronica had to be a brunette. There were certain kind of things that we had to follow. So we found KJ very late in the casting process, because I think the slide that's up now, he does not have red hair. But we had tested it a couple times and found just we weren't landing on what it is we wanted. That kind of young leading man, all-American, that had frankly, the correct hair color. But we just fell in love with KJ. His audition was so good and very soulful. He's actually from New Zealand. And so he kind of came out of nowhere in the 11th hour. We tested him. It was a slam dunk. I believe he was the last person cast on that pilot. And then we had to obviously transform him into Archie, which I think, if you see on the next slide,
there we go.
And we have to maintain that during production. But yeah, what we do to poor KJ's hair, just to kind of stay in production. He's a trooper about it. But yeah, I mean, that's for us, it was a lesson of, obviously there are certain things where you're looking for a very specific thing. And hair color seems like such a basic thing that you can change. But it was a reminder to us that sometimes you have to look outside of what you're looking for. My favorite examples tend to be those where there's something specific written on the page and you just find an actor that you bring in just to see what happens, and it ends up just transforming the character. Yeah, those are my favorite moments in casting.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let's talk, first of all, I want to invite our audience, if you have any questions, please go to the bottom of your screen and send them in to us. Hopefully we'll have a chance to address them before we sign off. I'd like to skip ahead to talking about COVID-19 and Hollywood right now. In Monday's New York Times, front page of the business section, big article, Hollywood tries to soldier on. And your and my conversations have been about precisely that in preparing for this episode. So could you talk a little bit about what you're doing right now and what you're going to be doing when you get off this broadcast and go back into meetings at the studio?
Yeah.
Not at the studio, via Zoom.
No, from home. So yeah, I guess it's about 6 weeks ago now. We knew that this was coming and we were kind of preparing ourselves to be able to figure out a way to work from home. But I think it was March 12th, which was a Thursday, was kind of the day where all of this started to kind of really come up in terms of production and realizing that things might not be safe anymore for people to go to set. So by and large, the 13th, which was a Friday, Friday the 13th, was the last day of shooting for many of our projects. So and also it was pilots, we were shooting pilots for next fall. So a lot of everything had to shut down. So all of our existing series that were in production, our pilots that were in production, we stopped casting on things that were about to go into production. So we ended up shutting down about 70 projects at the same time, sending everyone home if we were on location, having all of our staff figure out how to work from home. And that's where we are. I mean, we have shows that were kind of towards the end of their seasons that we're not able to wrap. My show Supernatural had 2 more episodes before the end of 15 seasons. They were wrapping up 15 years of story and we couldn't shoot those episodes. We will, but yeah, I mean, everything just got stopped. And so now we're having a lot of conversations about when we are able to go back into production. And we're analyzing a couple of schedules that are kind of written in the wind because it's going to be based on kind of global health. But what that's going to look like and how things are going to change. And are we going to have as much crew on set? So we're going to be able to have scenes where there are a lot of extras. How do you do fight scenes? How do you do intimacy scenes? These are all the questions we're asking ourselves right now. And I don't know that there's any real answers to them yet. But yeah, I mean, we're dealing with this in real time like everybody else is. And I have a show called All Rise, which is on CBS, that is actually doing a Zoom episode, which is currently filming. We have a couple more days, and everyone is doing it from their house. They're doing their own hair and makeup, and their set is essentially their living room or wherever they decide to film it. It's going to air on Monday, May 4th, and it'll be very interesting. The script was very powerful. It's about, the show is a courthouse show, but it's about how the legal system has been stopped, how people are trapped in jail because we can't have trials. So it's a very relevant topic right now that I think hopefully, will end up being a really powerful and interesting episode.
Wow. Wow. Wendy, Wendy Popek, now Wendy Hinton, she is joining the chat here. Thank you, Wendy. It's great to hear from you. We've all seen her photo twice. So I think we need to wrap up, as much as I hate to. But John, thank you so much for joining us today. Finally,
it was my pleasure.
Back to Fairfield via Zoom, but you're back. And
next time we'll be in person, I hope.
Yes, soon. So many thanks to John. Many thanks to our listeners. Come back next week. Danny Williams, who is the Senior Vice President for Finance and Administration at New York's Public Theater, home of Hamilton, A Chorus Line, and a million other hit shows, is going to be talking about the business of show business, and particularly how that business is doing during COVID-19. So thank you for joining us. See you next week.